Every search for Atlantis begins with the writings of the great Greek philosopher Plato.
Plato was essentially the father of Western philosophy, and because what he had to say was so important and has remained important throughout the history of Western thought, it became much more acceptable, much more respectable, if you will, than if someone else had written it.
In one of the most intriguing of his writings, Plato describes a remarkable utopian society. Rich in wealth and knowledge, their skills as builders and engineers were advanced beyond imagining. But, he says, the peace of this land was suddenly torn apart. Legend has it that the entire civilization was wiped out in a single day and night, engulfed by the ocean and lost to the world for thousands of years. No other mystery on Earth has sparked such obsession or given rise to so many extraordinary theories. On the Mediterranean island of Crete, a discovery was made in early 1900 that would add a new chapter in the search for Atlantis. An archaeologist named Arthur Evans, a real-life Indiana Jones, arrived on Crete. He was searching for the treasures of the ancient world.
Evans was looking for something very specific. He was looking for the first European culture, but he was also looking for the roots to Greek mythology.
Evans began his search in a hilltop settlement called Knossos. He soon found something that was beyond his wildest dreams. In the very first trench he dug, Evans unearthed a magnificent stone throne. It was the heart of a spectacular palace complex. Covering an area the size of 4 football fields and containing 10 times as many rooms as Washington's White House, the dig exposed construction on a massive scale.
What he found was beyond all expectations of anyone at the time, and essentially he defined the civilization around it, which he called the Minoan civilization.
The name Evans chose came from a figure in ancient Greek myth called King Minos. Minos was said to live in a great palace, at the center of which he had imprisoned a terrible monster. Half man, half bull, it was called the Minotaur.
Sir Arthur Evans thought that he had found the palace of King Minos. They probably had nothing to do with King Minos, but on the other hand, it seemed like a good label, and it has stuck.
Today, a groundbreaking new theory has emerged as to the origin of this lost world.
It's entirely possible that something like the Atlantis myth comes out of here, and it's passed on for centuries and grew in some kind of grand importance. And so there is this theory that the Minoans were in fact the early Atlanteans.
It is the sophistication of the palace on Crete that is the first link to the idea of Atlantis. The builders of this remarkable structure had achieved a level of engineering excellence that would not be seen anywhere else in the world for centuries. It is littered with artifacts dating back over 3,500 years. The remains of hundreds of decorative pots and beautiful wall paintings are being discovered. As investigators piece together the fragments of this ancient art, they are discovering sophisticated images of the people and the lives of a lost civilization.
People were extremely interested because this was going back beyond the boundaries of classical studies and classical archaeology into something entirely new, which had not really been envisaged before.
The buildings here are older than anything previously discovered on the island, and they are infinitely more advanced. Teams of experts are now searching for the clues that relate this complex architecture to Plato's story of Atlantis. Colin MacDonald has scoured every inch of the palace, above and below ground, to expose every technological achievement. And beneath the surface, he has discovered one of the site's most advanced features.
Down beneath all of this, there is the most remarkable water system, both for the drainage of water and for the water supply itself.
Astoundingly, this sophisticated network of pipes predates the plumbing of the great Greek and Roman empires by over 1,000 years.
These terracotta or clay water pipes are made up of 1 meter sections, the one tapering into the other. It took water to lots of different parts of the palace, and equally impressive systems were used actually to get water out of the palace for the drainage system itself.
A vast subterranean network carried wastewater away from the palace. Using the details of Colin's survey, we can now see how the drains circled through the palace's royal quarter.
We're right in the middle of the main drainage system of the palace here on the east side. It's stone built on either side, about 1 meter high here. In times of torrential rain, huge quantities of water could be dealt with by this drainage system.
A similarly sophisticated water management system is described in Plato's stories. He wrote of a palace where water was plentiful. Collected from the surrounding hills, it was in abundant supply throughout the city, just as it was here at Knossos. What's more, at the Palace of Knossos, the engineering above ground is every bit as sophisticated as that which Plato describes. The palace contained 1,300 rooms spread over 4 floors, all interconnected by miles of passageways. It was centuries ahead of anything seen from the same era on mainland Greece.
What we had on the Greek mainland in the period of the palaces was nothing more complicated really than maximum 3 or 4 room single-story mud brick structures. There's no grand architecture on the scale that we see in the Cretan palaces.
Plato describes the Palace of Atlantis as an acropolis sitting atop a great hill. At Knossos, we find just that. Construction must have involved huge earth-moving operations. The entire hilltop was flattened and terraces were carved so that the palace could be built on multiple levels. The large foundation blocks of the palace walls were constructed of crystalline stone called gypsum. It was quarried locally and then cut into massive blocks with bronze saws.
We're right in the middle of a large quarry used for quarrying the gypsum that was used in the construction of the first palace at Knossos. Here, one can see very, very clearly the tool mark of the bronze object which sliced away an enormous part of the face, and the resulting block, which would have fallen down, would then either have been worked here or moved the 800 meters or so over to the palace itself.
In the Atlantis myth, the external walls of the great palaces were said to shine like silver. Today, the gypsum walls of Knossos have been eroded by the elements, but in their full glory, they too would have sparkled.
You can almost imagine what it felt like for a Greek coming ashore in Crete and seeing something like the glimmering gypsum palace at Knossos, this giant, shiny structure glistening in the sun from all this crystalline gypsum, and on a scale like they couldn't have even possibly imagined at that time.
A vast royal residence, a place of worship and ceremony at the center of an advanced and wealthy civilization. Using their latest evidence, our team applies state-of-the-art imaging techniques to rebuild this prehistoric palace. We can now see the structure as it would once have stood here, supported by huge redwood pillars. Many believe this was Atlantis. Now, our investigators are going deeper, to the very fabric of this extraordinary palace in search of the vital clues that might provide proof. What they find is evidence of the cause of the destruction of this lost world.